Hi, it's Steph, and I'm at the Home Depot, and they have a whole new shipment of new shrubs, evergreens, perennials, and annuals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the late April inventory at the Home Depot. Oh my goodness, an exclusive only at the Home Depot. Proven Winners Quartz. I have had comments recently that the plant sizes have gotten really large and the price has gone up as well. So this is a great option to buy some Proven Winners plants, which are wonderful plants, at a lower price point. And some varieties I've never seen before at the Box Store Garden Center. Look at this. This is the Miss Piggy Picksqueak. Has these really large, beautiful, shiny leaves. This is a part shade plant, and this one actually says that it can take sun. But in general, the Pigsqueak is a part shade plant. And look at that. The blooms on these are a light pink flower. They're sort of bell-shaped, I would say. How pretty. So let's take a look at some of the Virginia is actually the name on these. And they're also known as Pigsqueak. So perennial, 16 to 18 inches in height. And let's see how big it gets. Needs 28-inch spacing. And it blooms in early spring, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. They have some of this dianthus, the fruit punch maraschino, and it looks like it's a really pretty kind of vibrant orangey red. Gets to be 9 to 11 inches in height. They are a full sun, part sun perennial. And what's interesting about these is it has this like strappy, grassy type foliage and a blue-gray coloring, which is really attractive. And they look like tiny carnations. Now, these aren't in bloom yet, but once they bloom and they have their first flush of blooms, you can shear them back and you'll get an additional flush of blooms. So these are a great perennial for the garden. Let's see how big they get. So we said 9 to 8 inches in height, so they're pretty short. They need 12-inch spacing, and they're hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are all the quartz size for $7.98 by Proven Winners. Found a couple that were in bloom, and check that out. It's actually a bright red, which would make sense, right? Like a maraschino cherry, even though the tag did make it look a little bit orange, didn't it? But it's a really beautiful bloom. Looks like a little carnation. And another beauty that I've never seen sold at the Box Store Garden Center, the Proven Winners Rock and Grow Coral Jade Sedum. And this quartz size, this is amazing. I can't tell you how exciting this is. It makes it so much more accessible and affordable to gardeners, right? To have them in a smaller size, which makes it easier to plant and more affordable if you wanted to get groups of 3 or 5 plants, for example. So the Rock and Grow Coral Jade Sedum is a full sun. Now, in general, sedums like full sun and a really well-draining soil that leans a little bit dry. If they have too much moisture, they can rot. So the size on these is 16 to 18 inches in height. So they're a medium-sized plant. Try to get it focused here. They need 28-inch spacing. They are hardy in zones 3 through 9 or negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And they bloom late summer through fall. Full sun. Such fun finds. They actually have quite a few varieties and really good varieties. So look at this one. This is the Cat's Pajamas Nepeta, also known as Catmint, and this is a wonderful perennial. It blooms for me in my garden from about mid-spring all the way through fall. And if you shear it back halfway through the summer, you'll get another flush. The pollinators absolutely love it. It has a really nice minty fragrance because catmint is part of the mint family. So Cat's Pajamas is also a shorter variety. Now, some of the older varieties are a little bit wider in the middle, like they'll sprawl and they'll kind of get split in the center and get really big and unruly. Not this one. This one is pretty compact. So the Cat's Pajamas is a 12 to 14 inch height. It needs 18-inch spacing. It is hardy in zones 3 through 8 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And it blooms late spring and through fall. Full sun. Walker's Low was the variety I was thinking about. That one can get pretty unruly, open in the center, and, you know, spreads a little bit. But this one here is pretty well behaved in my garden. The Cat's Pajamas Nepeta. It is a perennial. And if you're looking for a part sun or shade option, we have here some coral bells or heuchera. This is a really pretty variety by Proven Winners called Dolce Spearmint. It has a really pretty green leaf with some veining, almost has a silvery appearance to it. And these actually bloom. The bloom spikes look like this. These are in full bloom right now. They almost look like baby's breath or even like penstemon. They have a small little bell-shaped flowers that the pollinators really like. And you can cut those off. If you want to just grow this for foliage, you can do that as well. Heucheras are wonderful foliage plants. So if you have a shady garden and you want to add some color and some texture with just foliage, this is a good option. The Dolce Spearmint is a sunshade plant. It gets to be 8 to 10 inches in height, and that is, of course, when it's not in bloom. So just the foliage is 8 to 10 inches in height. It is a perennial. Gets a little bit taller once the bloom spikes are on the plant. It needs 16-inch spacing. It is hardy in zones 4 through 9 or down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early to midsummer. Light, it likes sun to part shade. And the scent led me to the lavender. This smells fabulous. This one is already starting to bloom. Has a really pretty blue-gray coloring. I grow lavender in my garden, an English lavender called Munstead, and for me it's done really well. They also like a really well-draining soil in full sun. It is perennial. $10.98 for these Nature's Nutrients plants by Home Depot. This variety is called Elegance Purple, and it gets to be 24 inches in height, 12 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms late spring through summer. The pollinators absolutely love lavender as well. They love any kind of purple spike flower I find in my garden. Now with lavender, I usually will cut it halfway through the summer after its first flush, and I'll get some sporadic reblooming, and then I leave the plant intact so that it can protect the crown of the plant over the winter. And then in late winter, early spring, I'll go through and I'll cut it down to only about a couple of inches so that I can prevent my plant from getting too woody. That is the thing with lavender. They can sort of take on a shrub appearance after a couple of years and get a little bit woody at the base. But other than that, they're really easy as long as you have a well-draining soil in a sunny spot. There's another variety. This one is called Super Blue Lavender, and it looks like it might be a bit of a shorter stature lavender. Let's check out the specs on this one. No, 24 inches, and it needs 12 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms late spring through summer. And a wonderful part shade perennial, which I've actually seen do quite well in more sun than it is rated for. So this is Dicentra, or bleeding hearts, and in general this has been known as a shade plant. However, I have a neighbor that has one in full sun, and hers is ginormous and produces so many blooms, and mine is in a part shade area and it doesn't get quite as many blooms. So I'm convinced that Dicentra, or bleeding hearts, can take a lot more sun than they're given credit for. And they're called bleeding hearts because look at this. Their little blooms look like hearts that are bleeding. These are adorable. Mine are actually just up in my garden now, here in my zone 6, and they are starting to bloom. I would say we're in the beginning, right? Beginning of spring, heading into mid-spring. And so this variety here, the Bleeding Hearts by Vigoro, they are deer resistant, and I can say that that is true because I have mine in a spot where the deer are pretty active and they don't touch them. This is $10.98. It has an arching habit, and you can kind of see that by the way that they grow. Right, real pretty. And in size, they get to be, let's see, they need 36-inch spacing, and they get to be about 30 inches in height. Blooms mid-spring through summer, hardy down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Another fun plant is Avens, also known as Geum, and I have some of this in my garden, and it blooms in mid-spring, and it's absolutely stunning. I love it so much. The variety that I have is called Mai Tai, and it's a bit of an apricot peach color, really pretty. Now this one here is in a larger container, and the variety is called Blazing Sunset Avens, or Avens, also known as Geum. This is a hybrid plant. It gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height. It needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms late spring through summer. And this is in the 1.5 gallons, $14.98. And these like full sun. If you've been watching my garden center tours for a while, then you know I like to show you some plant combinations. And look how beautiful this salvia looks paired with this geum. Such a stunning garden combination, and they bloom around the same time. The salvia will also bloom in mid-spring, and if you cut it back, it'll grow again. I have a video on my channel about how I keep my salvia coming back with multiple blooms. This variety here is called Lyrical Blue Salvia. It gets to be 24 to 36 inches in height. It needs 18 to 24 inch spacing, water when dry, and it is hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms early to late summer, and salvia also likes a well-draining soil in full sun. very favorite lambsare that started my lambsare obsession a couple of years ago is the Helen Von Steen lambsare. And I actually purchased it here at the Home Depot. I purchased 3 and I have had multiple plants since. It has a really beautiful soft blue-gray appearance, a fuzzy texture, really large leaves, and the deer do not touch it because they don't like plants with a fuzzy texture. This would make a great front of the border plant because it stays relatively low, but it does spread pretty wide. Mine have gotten as big as 3 by 3, okay, 3 feet in diameter. And they also make a wonderful ground cover. I can't say enough about this plant. And here's the bonus with lambsare. This particular variety does not send up bloom stalks, which means it won't drop seed and become invasive like some of the other varieties of lambsare. So this one here, perennial, full sun, lambsare, Helen Von Steen, gets to be 24 to 36 inches in height and needs 24 to 30 inch spacing. Water when dry, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And while it does say that it blooms midsummer, it has never bloomed for me in my garden. Gorgeous. Another favorite ground cover of mine, this is the Purple Dragon, and I don't even have to look at the tag. I know it is because I've purchased it here on a couple of occasions. Has this really pretty little purple bloom. You'll get sporadic blooming throughout the season. It'll start in spring and all the way through fall, you'll sporadically see a couple of blooms on the plant. Really large silvery gray appearance, silvery foliage, look at that. Wonderful ground cover. Also deer resistant in my garden. This also looks really pretty in a container. So if you wanted to use a perennial in a container for the season and then plant it out in your garden, this is a great use for this particular ground cover perennial. And the variety, it fooled me. It's actually called Orchid Frost. And now that makes sense because my Purple Dragon has a little bit deeper purple bloom and this one's a little bit more like a lavender pink, but the foliage is absolutely the same. So here are the specs on the dead nettle, also known as lamium, Orchid Frost. It gets to be 8 to 12 inches in height, needs 6 to 10 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it blooms early to late summer. And these containers here are $9.98. Some lupin. Look how beautiful the foliage on lupin is. It holds on to water droplets so beautifully. Look at this. Isn't that so pretty? Now lupin is a mid-spring bloomer. It's going to send up these beautiful spikes of purple flowers. Most varieties are purple. This one here is called Gallery Pink, so it'll be pink. It is a perennial. It likes full sun. Lupin also likes really well draining soil, so it doesn't want to sit in moisture, and full sun. So a soil that leans dry is where they'll do best. They are also really difficult to transplant because they have a long taproot. I have tried and I have lost some in my garden due to the transplant. So pick a spot that you know you'll like them to grow in and keep them there, because if you do try to transplant them, you could risk losing them. They also pair really beautifully with iris, Japanese bearded iris, because they bloom around the same time. At least they do in my garden, the varieties that I have, and they make beautiful companion plants. So perennial, full sun, lupin, Gallery Pink, it gets to be 18 to 20 inches in height. They need 15 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms late spring through summer. $9.98 for these. Look at this. They have some species tulips, and these are what they sometimes refer to as woodland tulips. These are the ones that are more deer resistant. Sometimes I've heard them called wild tulips. Look at that. They almost looked like a sunny side up egg when they're open because they have a yellow center with a white outer. And these here are $9.98. Let's see. A perennial bulb, so these will come back. So tulips in general are treated as annuals because they're not reliably perennial, meaning that they don't always return to your garden the following year. You might just get leaves, where this one is actually considered a perennial bulb and should return to your garden year after year. It likes full sun. This is called Tulipa tarda, or tulip, and it is a 6 inch height, 4 inch spacing, and water when dry, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms late spring. It's a really pretty strappy foliage too, which is a little bit daintier than the other tulips that you plant the bulbs in the fall. Finding a lot of cool plants with a lot of texture today. Look at this. This is Artemisia, and it has a really pretty silvery color to it. Really fuzzy and soft. This one is called Silver Mound. It is a perennial for full sun. It gets to be 10 inches in height, needs 15 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. My store happens to have a sale on their Creeping Phlox, which is another wonderful ground cover for early spring color. Mine is just starting to bloom. I have a light lavender blue color. Here in stock they have some pink, some white. The one that I have is actually this color, which is starting to open up. And they're on sale 2 for $10. Here's a fun iris, and you could pair this with your lupin. This is a variegated iris called variegata. Look at that. It is Iris pallida variegata. You get these variegated leaves and then a lavender tall iris. It is perennial. It has outstanding color, attracts hummingbirds, and has a clumping habit. You don't want to bury your rhizomes too deep. If you do, that is one of the #1 reasons why your iris don't bloom. They will just produce foliage but never send up blooms. So you want to make sure that the rhizome, the top of the rhizome, faces the sun. So don't plant them too deep. They like full sun, well-draining soil. They bloom late spring through summer. They get to be 24 to 30 inches in height. They need 10 to 12 inch spacing and hardy down to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Iris are very hardy. Here's another heuchera in the Home Depot Vigoro brand containers. This is a dark foliage one, and you can see how these plants in a shade garden would offer a lot of interest and add color with just their foliage. So this is called the Coral Bells or Heuchera Blackout. It has a mounded habit, 10 to 18 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, and hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms late spring through summer. And right on the side of it, we can't ignore this beauty. Look how vibrant that is. These two together, look at that. Gorgeous. So this one here is, let's see, it's called Fire Chief. Wow. Look how vibrant that is. So the Fire Chief heuchera coral bell here is, let's see, it's also a part sun perennial, and it has a mounded habit, and it gets to be 10 to 18 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms late spring through summer. This one's in bloom, has these little baby's breath looking blooms. Very sweet. Here is some dianthus that is nice and open, so you can get a feel for what the blooms look like. Very pretty. And this one has a very pretty coral salmon kind of pink color. And it is called Cadence Potpourri Dianthus. Clumping habit, 4 to 10 inches in height, needs 10 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. It likes full sun. And these are $10.98 in the Vigoro containers. And the one on the side of it is called Magenta Bicolor. Look how pretty that is. It almost looks like it has a speckling of red in the center. And the same specs. They have some annual 6-packs here for $3.48, and they have some marigolds in the yellow as well as the orange, and then the French marigold, the orange and yellow variety. They also have some Dusty Miller, and this is a 6-pack also for $3.48. Really pretty foliage to add an accent to a summer arrangement. I think this looks really beautiful with white flowers and something dark in the center, like either a dark potato vine hanging out the front or a cordyline. I think would make a really pretty combination. Some verbena. They have some red and purple and even some pink in the back there. Verbena is pretty easy annual to grow as well. There you go, 8+ hours of sun per day. Most annuals like a lot of sun. There are some that can take shade, like Impatiens, for example, but this is a pretty one. Check out this beauty. This color really caught my eye. At first, from afar, I thought it was aster, but it's actually an annual. It kind of looks like African daisies, but let's check out the tag and see what it is. It is called Pericallus Senetti. And it is an annual, long blooming, outstanding color, mounding habit, $21.98 for this 10-inch planter. Very full plant. Look at that. Lots of buds. Same plant, different color, and this really vibrant, like purple, pink. Really pretty. Same type of plant. Pericallus Senetti. $21.98 for these planters. They look pretty even together, right? Look at that. They have 6-packs of wave petunias for $10.98. Really pretty soft colors of buttery yellow, light pink, and lavender purple. These would actually look really pretty even together. Now, petunias have a tendency to get leggy throughout the season. Don't be afraid to cut them. Shear them back. They'll start bushing up again and sending out more blooms. And some annuals for part shade. So you have some tuberous begonias, and these come in a lot of pretty colors. There is a light pink, this peachy color. They even have some yellow ones. I see one over here. And the tuberous begonias here by Vigoro. Let's see, these are their little quart containers. It looks like they are 4 for $12 here at my store for the Vigoro annuals. Then you have some freesia also, or fuchsia. I always confuse freesia with fuchsia because of the F word, right? The F letter there. These are $4.98, and they're going to open up and they look like little dangly earrings. Really cute blooms, and the pollinators really like them, especially the hummingbirds. Part sun annual. Gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height, needs 8 to 10 inch spacing, water when dry, has a trailing habit. These look nice even in hanging baskets. Look at this polka dot plant. Some people even use these as a house plant, right? But they have it out here as an annual for your summer containers. And geraniums, of course, a really traditional, pretty part shade annual. Has really nice foliage and will send up these blooms. And I deadhead mine regularly throughout the season, and then they keep putting up these little bloom stalks. Zonal geraniums, pelargoniums, this is another name for them. Gets to be 12 to 15 inches in height. Water when dry. It has an upright habit. And some impatiens, which also look really pretty in a shady area under a tree. They have them in this coral color, in red, as well as in white. Some annual salvias. Now there are 2 varieties of salvia. There's the annual and the perennial. This one here is an annual variety that you would put in your containers. These come in an 8-pack, it looks like. The hummingbirds also really like these because they get into those little tubes with their beak to get some nectar. Another really pretty annual in a shade of red if you're looking for red annuals. These annual 8-packs of salvia are $11.98. Well, I did find some African daisies or osteoporum, and these are proven winners ones. These are 1 gallons, and let's see, they're $9.98. Look at all those buds. So nice and full. These will bloom all season long. But they are annual, so they'll only bloom this year and then not return, depending on what zone you're in. Here in my zone 6, these are treated as an annual. They're called the Bright Lights Osteoporum. And the Proven Winners annuals are also starting to roll in here at my store, and they have some of the blue lobelia. This is the Laguna lobelia. Has these really dainty little flowers in the color blue. Blue purple coloring, right? And these like part shade, I find. So it says part sun to sun. I do think that they fade a little bit faster in sun. They, in my experience, do a little bit better in part shade. If you are going to have them in sun, morning sun, afternoon shade is probably best. They get to be 6 to 12 inches in height, long blooming, no deadheading. $5.98 for these. These are the small quart size. They also have some petunias and super bells. So these are the smaller blooms. They're probably the super bells. Let's see. Yep, Super Bell's Grape Punch, Calabricoa. $5.98 for this 1.5 pint container. Annual. And the tiny one here in this fuchsia pink striped one. Let's see. Look at that. So pretty. And this variety is, let's see, the Calabricoa, no, Super Bell's Calabricoa, yep, Rising Star. And it's $5.98. These are all full sun. These get really large, so you're seeing this little container here and you'll be tempted to get a few of them, but even just a couple in a container, 1 to 2 in a small planter would do it for the season. That is especially true with sweet potato vine. These, you only need 1 and they get monstrous by the end of the season. Some of them, the new varieties, will grow upward. Most of them trail downward. So this one here is the, let's see, Proven Winners, Proven Accents, Sweet Caroline, Bewitched, Green with Envy. $5.98. Really pretty. Looks so lovely trailing down the front of a dark container or any planter, really. The filler, the thriller, and the spiller. This would be your spiller. They also have these 12-pack of annuals with some of the big leaf begonias, and I have a whole new appreciation for these this year. I'm really loving them. Look at that dark, shiny foliage. So they have this light pink. They also have them in white, like a creamy white color, and in red. Now they have the red with the green foliage and the red with the dark foliage, but I like the dark foliage so much better. Look how pretty that is. Here's a better look at the tuberous begonias. They're absolutely gorgeous. They have these little rosettes, really pretty. So here is the yellow, and this is the peachy color, and the pink. The one we saw inside was kind of closed, but these are more open. Gorgeous. And so more of these zonal geraniums. Look how pretty. The foliage with this coloring on the ends of them, so pretty. This is a hot pink color. And all of these Vigoro quart-sized containers are 4 for $12 right now at my store. The really pretty mid to late spring perennial is a poppy. Has this really pretty ferny foliage, and with poppies there are annual varieties and perennial. This is a perennial poppy, and the variety is called Princess Victoria Louise. Now I had these in my garden, but I ended up losing one of them because I tried to dig it up and move it. These also have long tap roots, so moving them is difficult, and I ended up losing one because I did try to move it. But they have a really pretty kind of like tissue paper bloom. The color is a little bit darker than it shows in the picture there, but it is a salmon pink with a dark center. And this one here says it gets to be 30 inches in height, needs 20-inch spacing, water when dry. They also like a well-draining soil that doesn't hold on to too much moisture, and full sun. Hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Blooms late spring through summer. Some Celine. I've never grown this plant before. Let me know what you know about it. It has a lot of foliage, and then it sends up these blooms that sort of almost look like flocks. This Celine here likes, I believe it said like full sun. Let's take a look. Yep, full sun perennial. Rolly's favorite is the variety. It gets to be 8 to 18 inches in height, needs 12 to 18 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms late spring through summer. Look at this fun find. This is a Japanese holly dwarf pagoda, and it's kind of what you would call like a specimen tree or evergreen. If you wanted to put this in a planter, it would look really cool. Almost similar to, say, a boxwood, but it has like this like stacked appearance, right? Look at that. All of the leaves kind of stack one on top of the other. And it is dwarf, which means it has a really slow growth habit. Only getting 12 to 24 inches in height. So 12 to 24 inches in height. It needs 24 to 30 inch spacing, and hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And these are $14.98 for this container here, 3.78 liter. Okay, this is another really fun find, except that these don't look the greatest. I did purchase a whipcord arborvitae at my Home Depot last season, and it looks amazing. These look like they got a little bit leggy, but in any case, they are a really interesting plant. The Tuja whipcord, these are $19.98, which is the same thing that I paid, and it makes just a really interesting mound. Look at that. Almost looks like a Cousin It hair, doesn't it? It is a full sun shrub. The deer don't touch it in my garden. It gets to be 18 to 24 inches in height, provides winter interest as it is an evergreen, and 24 to 36 inches in spacing, hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also a really slow grower, which is excellent for a dwarf type conifer or something you want to keep size controlled. So I really liked that. But maybe you'll find one of these whipcord arborvitaes near you that look like they're in better shape. But if you do, grab one because they're really cool. And another favorite evergreen of mine is Hinoki. This one here is Hinoki Cypress Verdon. And these have a really nice texture. They have sort of like a fan kind of look to them. And they're all kind of stacked over one another. Really pretty. This one seems to have golden tips. It likes sun. Gets to be 3 to 8 feet in height. Needs 36 inch spacing. And it is hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. I have about 6 Hinokis in my garden at the moment. Wonderful evergreens. And this one here, let's see, is a number 3 container for $34.98. You want to add some blue color to the garden? Here's another evergreen option. This one is Juniper Angelica Blue. And look at the habit on that. It has a really nice horizontal kind of arching habit. It says it gets to be 5 to 6 feet in height. It likes full sun. Any evergreen that is yellow or blue is going to have the best color in full sun. It needs 10 to 15 foot spacing, and it is hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's see, these containers here are a number 3 for $26.98. Some sky pencil holly. These have a really pretty vertical upright growth habit. They're very modern looking. So if you have like a modern or Zen kind of garden aesthetic, these would be really great evergreens. They're also deer resistant, and they grow upright. They stay pretty compact. in my experience, they get to be about 3 to 4 feet in width and maybe about 6 to 8 feet in height. We'll confirm that on the specs, but they can also take a little bit of shade. So part shade to full sun. They're deer resistant. They get to be 6 to 10 foot in height and need 36 to 48 inch spacing. Hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Now these did go up in price a little bit from last year. They are $39.98. Last year they hovered somewhere around $29.98, but they are really pretty evergreen. Sweet flag, and I've talked about this quite a few times in my videos. I absolutely love this. I have it in my garden. This is a really good alternative to, say, Hakonakloa or Japanese forest grass. It stays evergreen for me in my garden. It also can deal with moist spots. I have it in a bed that stays pretty wet, and it does really well. It keeps this golden color all year round. It gets much more vibrant in cooler temperatures of spring and fall. Easy to divide. It's just a workhorse. I absolutely love this. It's a perennial grass, part sun. Mine is in full sun, but because the bed is so moist, it handles it really well. And the variety is called Ogon. It's a variegated type. You can see it's green and yellow. And this container is $12.98. And I've actually divided mine, like I said, a bunch of times. Took a look at this gorgeous shrub when it wasn't quite leafed out yet a few weeks back, and look at it now. This is the lemon lace elderberry. Proven winners Sambuca. Lemony lace, $29.98. Now I will say that elderberry in my garden is not deer resistant. I have the black lace elderberry. This one also stays a little bit smaller than the black lace. So the black lace is about 10 to 12 foot in height and width, and I want to say this one stays somewhere in the 6 to 8 foot height and width, but you can definitely check that out on the Proven Winners website just to make sure. They like full sun, and it is $29.98 for, this is a number 2 gallon container. And some beautiful peonies. These are Ito peonies, which are a cross between an herbaceous peony and a tree peony. So these are a little bit more sturdy and would require less staking than, say, the herbaceous type. These are all leafed out. They're going to start forming buds pretty soon. Actually, it already has some buds on it. And this is a beautiful buttery yellow variety, the Bartzella. And it is a number 3 container for $39.98. You can see the color here. Bartzella says that it will give you outstanding peony with large 6 to 9 inch vibrant yellow semi-double flower blooms. And it planted in full sun, prefers moist, well-drained soil, grows 3 to 4 feet tall, and it is hardy in zones 4 through 9. And here are some herbaceous peonies. This is my favorite in my garden. It is the Sarah Bernhardt. It's a really gorgeous pink peony, so fragrant. This one does require a little bit of staking because the blooms are so heavy, but I've had it for several years and it's outstanding in my garden. So here is the information on the Sarah Bernhardt peony. It gets to be 36 to 39 inches in height, at 36 to 48 inch spacing, water when dry, hardy down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and blooms early spring through summer. Mine in my garden in my zone 6 blooms in June, and they make the most beautiful bouquets. You only need a couple to have an impressive bouquet. They're very frilly. They look very similar to an English rose. These are heirloom type plants. If you have a peony, it's going to last upwards of 50 years or more. Beautiful plants. They also have a variety called Alexander Fleming, which is more of a fuchsia color. These are $24.98 for number 2 containers. Still lots of trees available, and of course now you're getting to see all of the beautiful spring blooms. So a lot of these trees are multi-season interest. For example, a crabapple. This is going to start blooming any day now. You can see all of the blooms on it, the buds rather, look at that. And this is the crabapple prairie fire. It is a full sun tree. These are medium-sized trees, getting to be about 20 feet in height and 15 to 20 feet in width. And crabapples will get fruit in the fall for the birds. So not only do you get pretty spring blooms, you'll also get fall fruit. And there is the persistent variety and non-persistent. The persistent holds on to the fruit a little bit better, and the non-persistent will drop fruit and can be a little bit messy. This one here is a number 7 container for $84.98. Look at this beautiful crabapple, just starting to open up and bloom now. This one is called Indian Summer. That is gorgeous. Also likes full sun, 15 to 20 feet in height, 15 to 20 feet in width. And a Japanese maple. If you've been around my channel for a little while, you know that I have a collection of Japanese maples. I absolutely love them. This is a great option if you're just starting out with Japanese maple and you want a traditional red one that you often see used in landscapes in the front yard or in borders. here is one that you could try. This is called Japanese Maple Red Select. They like full sun. The red varieties can take a little bit more sun than some of the others. This one here looks like it'll get 10 to 12 feet in spacing that it needs, and it's hardy down to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And there is the habit, a weeping habit, 6 to 10 feet in height. Japanese Maple Acer Dissectum Red is a number 3 container for $69.98. My goodness, the fragrance drew me in. Look at these gardenias. Gorgeous. Now, gardenias here in my zone can only be grown as annuals, and these look like they've been trained into a topiary. Look at that. So fragrant. They are $39.98. Here is a wonderful blue evergreen that I absolutely love in my garden. I have 4 of them. This is the Blue Star Juniper. Look at this stunning blue color. They're so well behaved. I've had mine for 10 years. They only get to be about 3 by 4 in diameter and only about 12 to 18 or 20 inches in height. Look at that. They want full sun. They're deer resistant in my garden. And these here are number 3 containers of the Juniper Blue Star for $29.98. And another Hinoki. This one is called Tempelhof Hinoki Cypress. It is a part sun shrub. It looks like it gets 4 to 6 feet in height. Needs 4 to 5 foot spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's check out the price on this one. It is a number 5 container for $59.98. Another really interesting and pretty evergreen that offers a contrast in texture is a pine. And this one here is a dwarf mugo pine. And it has all of its spring growth with these candles here. That is what they call this growth here. Now, a way to control the growth on a mugo pine or on a pine or evergreens that have candles is by doing what they call candle pruning when they appear in the spring. So you could cut these off and it would control their growth. Now, this is considered a dwarf mugo pine. And I have one in my garden, and in my experience, it's pretty slow growing. In fact, when you have a evergreen or conifer that is classified as dwarf, it just means that it has a slower growth habit. So this one here gets to be it's a full sun shrub. It gets to be 4 to 5 feet in height and in width. So you need to give it about 5 foot spacing, and it is hardy down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So very hardy and also deer resistant. And these here are a number 3 container for $29.98. And we've arrived at the yellow evergreen table. And this one here is one of my favorites, the Fall Cypress Golden Mop. I actually had one that got a little bit too large for its space, so I made it a little topiary tree, and it looks fabulous. I have a video about it on my channel. So here is a full sun shrub. This will get the most vibrant golden color in full sun. And to test that, you would just look at the underneath side, and you can see that anything that doesn't get sun, that is hidden underneath the foliage, is green. So if you have this in too much shade, this will no longer be gold, it'll turn a shade of green. So it is deer resistant in my garden. I can vouch for that. It gets to be 4 to 6 feet in height, and it needs 36 to 48 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. And it has a really pretty texture, very kind of graceful and arching, ferny, very pretty. So these here are a number 3 container for $29.98. And Japanese Holly Golden Hellery is another shrub that has some yellow coloring. Now, holly is very similar to boxwood in their foliage. You can see that. These also stay pretty compact. They like part sun, 30 to 36 inches in height. And it needs 26 to 48 inch spacing, hardy down to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And the Golden Hellery is a number 3 container for $39.98. And Arborvitae Rheingold. Now these grow a little bit taller than, say, the Fire Chief that stays a little bit rounder. So this one takes on kind of a conical shape. But what's cool about these is that they take on like a bronze coloring in the winter. They like full sun, and then they get really, really yellow chartreuse color in the spring and summer. So a really interesting evergreen. And it needs 3 to 5 foot spacing, hardy down to negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Tuja Rheingold number 3 container is $29.98. My store has a special on 10-inch hanging baskets for $12.98. These are all petunias, different shades of fuchsia and burgundy and pink. Well, that brings us to the end of the late April inventory here at the Home Depot. I hope that you've enjoyed checking out what my store has in stock, and I hope that you can find some of these varieties near you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button. And please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.